Animated series often walk a fine line between entertaining audiences and delivering meaningful stories, but Static Shock was a rare gem. While most Saturday morning cartoons stuck to flashy action scenes and neatly resolved conflicts, Static Shock dared to delve into the uncomfortable truths of the real world. Racism.
Well, you got what you wanted, Dad. My best friend's gone because of you and your stupid racism. I hate you!
Poverty.
When you're homeless, people look right through you. It's like you're not even there.
Gang violence. This show tackled them all, but one episode took things to an even deeper level. Today, we're exploring Jimmy, the darkest episode of Static Shock and one of the most daring episodes in animated television. It's a story that left a lasting impression on viewers, not because of its supervillains or thrilling battles, but because it presented a harsh, unfiltered reality, the ripple effects of bullying, isolation, and despair. Buckle up, because this is more than a recap. This is a look at why Jimmy is still so relevant, how the creators used animation to address real-world tragedies, and what we can learn from it today. What set the show apart was its willingness to tackle social issues head-on. It wasn't just about good versus evil, it was about understanding the gray areas of morality and the systemic issues that created villains in the first place. Episodes addressed racism, police brutality, and homelessness, topics that weren't exactly standard fare for kids' TV. But Jimmy took it a step further, diving into one of the most polarizing and sensitive topics of its time, school shootings. The episode begins with Virgil and Richie enjoying their usual dynamic, playful banter, tight-knit friendship, and a casual teenage vibe. Enter Jimmy Osgood, an old friend of Virgil's who doesn't quite fit the mold of a popular or confident teenager. Jimmy is quiet, introverted, and visibly struggling to connect with others. From the outset, Jimmy's isolation is palpable. The writers don't hammer it in with dramatic speeches or over-the-top gestures. Instead, they rely on subtle cues: Jimmy's body language, the way other characters treat him, and the unspoken pain in his eyes. Jimmy is a character many of us might recognize, a kid who doesn't stand out but isn't invisible either. He's there, lingering on the edges of social circles, hoping for a chance to belong but rarely finding it. As viewers, we're drawn to Jimmy's vulnerability. There's something deeply human about his awkwardness and his quiet yearning for connection. And that's what makes his eventual actions so heartbreaking. The tension builds slowly but deliberately. Richie, known for his quick wit and sometimes cutting humor, makes an offhand comment that hits Jimmy harder than intended. It's the kind of moment most of us have experienced, saying something we think is harmless, only to realize later how deeply it hurt someone else. For Jimmy, Richie's words are the final straw. Already struggling with bullying, rejection, and loneliness, Jimmy begins to spiral. The episode doesn't rush this process. Instead, it shows us how pain accumulates over time. This is where the show's writing truly shines. It doesn't present Jimmy as a villain or a caricature. He's a kid in pain, overwhelmed by feelings of worthlessness and invisibility. The story takes a devastating turn when Jimmy brings a gun to school. For a kids' show, this was an unthinkably bold move. But Static Shock doesn't sensationalize the moment. Instead, it portrays it with a sobering sense of reality. Jimmy isn't portrayed as a threat or a monster. He's a scared, desperate kid who sees no other way to cope with his pain. The gun isn't a symbol of power for him, it's a cry for help. The confrontation between Virgil, Richie, and Jimmy is one of the most emotionally charged scenes in the series. Virgil, despite his superhero persona, is just a teenager trying to reach his friend. There are no flashy powers or heroic speeches here, just raw human emotion. Jimmy's pain is laid bare in this moment. He doesn't want to hurt anyone, he just wants the pain to stop. What makes Jimmy so impactful is its exploration of collective responsibility. The episode doesn't place all the blame on Jimmy. Instead, it forces us to consider how small actions, bullying, neglect, thoughtlessness can accumulate and push someone to the edge. Richie's guilt is a central theme in the aftermath. His offhand comment, though unintentional, becomes a catalyst for Jimmy's breakdown. This isn't to say Richie is the villain, far from it. But the episode highlights how even well-meaning people can contribute to someone else's pain without realizing it. This reflective approach is what sets Static Shock apart. It doesn't preach or moralize, it invites. To understand the full weight of Jimmy, we have to look at the cultural context of the early 2000s. School shootings were becoming an all-too-common headline, and the fear surrounding them was palpable. For a kids' show to tackle this issue so directly was unprecedented. At a time when most media avoided the topic altogether, Static Shock stepped up to address it head-on. The decision wasn't without risks. Parents and networks could have easily pushed back against such a heavy subject. But the creators understood that their audience wasn't oblivious to these issues. Kids were living these fears, seeing them on the news, and sometimes even in their own communities. By addressing the topic, Jimmy became more than just an episode. It became a conversation starter. One of the most important aspects of Jimmy is its focus on mental health. The episode doesn't frame Jimmy as a villain. It frames him as a victim of his own circumstances and untreated struggles. This approach was ahead of its time. Mental health wasn't a common topic in media back then, especially not in shows aimed at younger audiences. But Static Shock broke that mold, showing the importance of empathy, understanding, and reaching out to those who are struggling. Let's take a moment to appreciate the risks the creators took with this episode. School shootings were, and still are, a deeply polarizing topic. Addressing them in a kids' show was a gamble that could have easily backfired. But the creators handled the subject with care and nuance. They didn't glorify or sensationalize the tragedy. Instead, they used the story to explore the emotional and societal factors that lead to such events. This was storytelling with purpose. It wasn't about shock value or ratings. It was about making a difference. The ending of Jimmy is bittersweet. Jimmy faces the consequences of his actions, but there's also a sense of hope. Virgil and Richie, despite their guilt and regret, resolve to be better friends, not just to Jimmy, but to everyone around them. The message is clear. We all have a role to play in creating a kinder, more understanding world. Even decades later, Jimmy remains one of the most talked about episodes of Static Shock. It's a testament to the power of animation as a medium for storytelling. The episode's themes of empathy, kindness, and mental health are as relevant today as they were in 2002. And for many viewers, it was a wake-up call, a reminder to treat others with compassion and to recognize the signs of someone in pain. Jimmy isn't just an episode, it's a legacy. It's a reminder that even in a world of superpowers and villains, the most important battles are often the ones we fight within ourselves. Static Shock was more than just a superhero show. It was a mirror to society, reflecting the issues we often try to ignore. And episodes like Jimmy prove that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is simply be kind. So, what are your thoughts on this episode? Did it resonate with you as much as it did with me? Let's discuss in the comments. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay grounded, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next one.